Thank you very much. That's the maximum. Okay, let's see if the other device can come on and then I'll use that one instead. Okay.
Is that lunch or snack?
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Oh, sorry.
Please ignore that.
I didn't mean it.
Yeah. It's more like dinner, but yes.
All right. Okay. So thank you so much for the invitation. I'm hoping to use we are still trying to log in on my other device. That one, the volume is a bit clearer and better. But in the meantime, time is far gone. So I would like to dive in so that we can get something decent out of this session. So I'm Adolphine Adolate. I didn't hear all the plenty nice things he said about me. I'm sure they are all true and more, hopefully. And I am very excited about research in general. So it's always a good opportunity for me to delve into it some more. Please, as you know, this is not a classroom lecture session. We are engaging each other here as colleagues, and of course, me talking to the big men in Ghana and beyond. So please feel free to chime in at any point. I may not see a hand up, but moderator, please, I'm open to comments or questions as we are going along. Okay. Please, I hope everyone is okay with that.
Yes, I heard everyone say yes. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. So just as an outline, I'm hoping to touch on the introduction aspects of your writing, whether it's for your project proposal or it's for the manuscript. And to do that, I'll also touch on something that is quite salient for highlighting what your work is about, and that's the problem. And then we'll talk about the justification of your research, which is also known as the significance. And then I believe that I was also invited to touch on the study objectives. So I'll try to do that briefly as well. Okay. So you are all very much familiar with the sections of a manuscript, and you've done the literature review. So this should be a breeze going into the introduction, I hope. But basically, the introduction writes on the back of the literature review. Okay. So for the introduction, we call it the introduction, which sounds nice and simple, but the truth is that it is part of a larger introductory section. So that introductory section has the first thing in there to be your introduction or background. Then you have a problem in there somewhere. If it's a research proposal, the problem statement is carved out separately and more extensively written. But if it's for a manuscript, then it means you have to kind of summarize as much as possible to fit in there. Maybe you fit the problem into a paragraph or two. Okay. Then we have the justification or your significance, which is also part of the introductory section. And then depending on, again, whether you are doing the proposal section or you are writing a manuscript, you may need to feature a framework. But I will not be touching on the framework for today because it's a big component. So if that is needed, we can chip in another time to go into a conceptual framework, as in how to conceptualize and synthesize the work you want to do. But I will certainly address the objectives, as I said. Okay, so for the introductory section, let's begin with the introduction, or AKA background. Please, is everyone good so far?
Yes, you are loud and clear. Thank you.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. So with the introduction, I'm sure that we've all written it severally. Whether or not we were really happy with what we wrote, that is a separate and another issue. But we've certainly written some introductory information before. And the background information is important because it's our reason for wanting to do that work, for having that topic. So the information about that study aspect, that field, that area, is what we are going to describe in our introduction. Okay. And the problem statement aspect will now give us an expanded information about what it is that we are actually seeking to address. Okay, so if let's say in your introduction you highlight maybe a gap, the problem must kind of hammer into what that gap is and why we need to do that research as the justification. Okay, so your objectives will then kind of wrap it up by saying what we hope to take away or learn from this study, which means that whatever you are putting in objectives must be things that are doable and actionable so that you can have results to report on it. So ideally, I don't know if the abstract has been covered yet because it's usually the very last thing we do, but in your abstract, you can't not talk about your objectives. Even if what you set out to find ended up not being exciting, you must still highlight that before you get to maybe draw in 1 or 2 sentences about what you think is now interesting. But the objectives must certainly always be answered. So with your introduction bit of the introductory section, the purpose of your introduction is to steer your readers into your topic, whatever topic you've come up with for your proposal. So your main goal is to generate interest in why this topic. So the topic itself might be catchy and nice, but if what you've written in the introduction is not a good enough warm-up or overview, then that means that people will lose interest in pursuing what you have put together so far. So just like in any meaningful discourse, introductions are important. When you are trying to play matchmaker, for example, and you are introducing someone to your friend, I think you go straight into the things that you think the other person will find interesting about your friend, not what you think is interesting in general. Okay, so you nail into that bit and then let the person see that, oh, this is something worth pursuing for them to come closer. I hope I'm not lying. Oh, for those who have played matchmaker before, isn't that how we introduce people?
Haruna.
But why are you mentioning names?
Haruna, won't you respond?
All right. So introductions are important. I mean, what you say is what will keep the person rooted to listen more about who you are introducing, or they'll just brush it off and move on. Okay. So you are preparing the reader to understand the work and appreciate it. And a good first impression is the way to keep their attention. Okay. So let me just quickly draw in some of the don'ts first, because the do's, there will be plenty to do. Now, when you are doing an introduction, stating the obvious is really not the way. I remember I said that you would probably start with what you think your friend is looking out for, not saying that, oh, this is a female. I'm sure the person is assuming that she's a female, that's why you're introducing him to the male. So we don't want to state the obvious. So I have an example here, like malaria is a disease that's transmitted through the bite of a female Anopheles mosquito. Thank you for the plenty grammar. But the truth is that you are trying to define things. You are trying to, it's like we don't know that a dictionary exists or something, so we don't want definitions. Okay, and we don't want you to turn this into a thesis or a literature review just yet. It's not that comprehensive. Okay, so technical language is also something that might throw people off in the introduction. Okay, as in overly technical language, basic technical might be warranted, but overuse of technical language will certainly put people off, especially when they have no idea of the field. They just found your topic interesting and were hoping to learn more. Okay, so when you are doing the introduction, your goal is to begin from the general to the particular. Okay, so if we go back to the example with you playing matchmaker, for example, you go like, oh, it's good you are here because I've been meaning for you to meet this fine friend of mine. Fine friend of mine is the general before you get into the particular detail. Okay, or this gorgeous, beautiful, lovely friend of mine, So the general is just as important as the particular. Okay, and for us in research, the general means then that if what you are researching or you plan to do is something that is of interest globally, then you need to highlight that before you go into why it is also a problem locally or nationally. Okay. Now, in writing the introduction, we usually encourage that don't focus on primary individual research. So you take one article, one cross-sectional study, one cohort study, and you are now trying to summarize all of them. Those are what you did in the literature review. But in the introductory section, we are hoping that you because it's an overview of the situation and why this research is going to be done, review articles and then systematic reviews in particular are more comprehensive. Okay, so they have summarized the outlook about that particular topic. So you then bring in some information from there takes us straight to what you want to achieve. Okay, please, any questions so far? So systematic reviews and then regular reviews or desk reviews, those are the go-tos for you to summarize for your introduction, so that ideally you also don't end up repeating yourself, as in using information from your literature review and then ending up plagiarizing yourself in the introduction. Please, is there any question about that or any comments? Any clarity required?
Okay, so far so clear from my end.
Okay.
I'm
I
think
that.
so. I think we've set it such that the participants cannot unmute and interrupt.
Okay.
So that may
Okay.
that
So
may
you
explain
think
why
I should
people
go
are
ahead?
not.
All right. All right.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right. Then thank you. All
But
right.
if you want to interact, we can also change that setting so that it's easy for people to respond.
Okay.
Admin, please take notes. Yeah, so that people can unmute and respond. Please take notes. Thank you.
Let's hear from you. All right. Please, there will be a little bit echo while I'm transitioning to another device. Okay. Let's share from here. Sunday documents. Share screen. It's in, just go here. Yeah, that one, the first one. No, the top. Go to the top. The top is up. Right and research. Okay. So should I go back here? Otherwise, I'll just use the old one. And you open. All right. Okay. All right, then let me continue with you. So I should look out of this one. We are good? All right. Okay. Please, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, you are back.
All right. Thank you. All right. So continuing from what I was saying about moving from the general to the specific, in your introduction, what you want to highlight is broadly what is known about your subject area so far. And in this, we are not assuming that you are going to address every single thing that is known, because new research is always being published. But as much as possible, I'm sure in your literature review, you were encouraged to use recent information as much as possible, the last 5 years or 3 years. So it means that in sharing what is known, you also be quite current with the information. Okay. But it's not just about what the evidence says so far in terms of what we know. It's also what the evidence is saying about the aspects of that topic area that we don't know much about, or that is still a bit murky. Okay. So in telling us the aspects that we are still not clear about, then it means that you will be identifying gaps in research, things that we do need to do something about or get information about to be able to address a particular problem. Okay. So the last bit of your introductory section, the last paragraph, always highlights what particular gap you are intending to address and briefly how you intend to go about it. Okay. So it's going to link the knowledge that you shared so far to practice. How what you are going to do now will be of importance. Okay. So ideally, we see things like how people put sentences about how this research will impact public health practice, but it's not just about stating that. It goes more to what exactly will be accomplished with this. So a bit more targeted information about what your research seeks to achieve. I stopped sharing. Oh, okay. All right. Please, can you see the screen?
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So with the introduction, much as it is the first thing that people see aside your abstract, it doesn't necessarily have to be the very first thing that you write. And the reason is, as you have to do some bit of reading. Okay, you may not need the comprehensive literature review just yet, but you have to read some information around your topic area. Okay, now in writing the introduction, because we know that if you are doing a proposal section, then a literature review will be done. It means that we are expecting a brief introduction. So ideally, you are not encouraged to write a lot. Okay, and the paragraphs can be divided into about 4 to cover each of the 4 aspects of the introductory section. So we are looking then at, single spaced at most 2 pages of that then. And if you are going to publish, we all know that journals are very tight on space. So it means that you would need to now further summarize the information that is there. Now, if you are beginning the introduction and it's for a project, a proposal you're putting together, you could go as much as 4 pages, and then as you are reviewing, you kind of trim it down. Okay. But keep in mind that you have to be working within paragraphs, because in the introductory section, we do not need headings. Headings are not typically required, except for when you are publishing particular types of information where, because much is not known about that topic area, then the journal will require that you use subheadings to kind of make it like a literature review, a mini literature review. Okay. So that means then that if it's about publication, you always have to follow the guidelines and look at what is required for that journal. Okay. Now, when you are doing the introduction, as I said, you are beginning with the known and going to the unknown aspects of it. Okay. So in the unknown aspects, you are suggesting the importance of your research. Okay. But keep in mind that because you are using aggregate data as much as possible, like the systematic reviews to highlight key information, your references will be kept to a minimum in the introduction. Okay. And we've said that we should keep it as short as possible, not so many pages. Now, in the introduction, even though you are stating a gap or a couple of gaps that you need to be addressing, that will kind of present the question you want to answer. But you don't also go ahead and start to put expected results in terms of what's giving a hint about when you find this, it will help you to do this. Okay, that is a bit presumptive. So even if it's expected, it's more about what the research will impact, what it seeks to do. Okay, and as I said, we want to keep it brief because too much information, and you might also end up throwing the person off. Too much to read, too much to appreciate, and then it becomes not appreciated. Okay, so when you identify the gap in research, you are trying to get at why the study is necessary. Then you will need to address, as I said, how you are planning to go about your research. So what would be briefly your approach? So if, for example, a tool has been used, let's say everybody used waist circumference, and their findings. The gap means that if we were to use something like a DEXA scan or BMI or something else, it would help us to more comprehensively understand the information and put in place, measures to address the situation. Then you highlight why the new approach is being used. So that then tells us, in addition to answering the question, what is new about your study? So you've already started selling the study before you get to the justification. Okay. Right. Now, I've said that the introduction is leading your reader into your paper or your proposal. So it's major highlights of your topic. What aspects do you think that people really must know about? Okay. And as I've said, avoid repeating things in the introduction that you intend to put in the literature chapter. Otherwise, you end up plagiarizing yourself. Okay. Now, if you are putting together the proposal, the problem must come out clearly in terms of the gap that you are seeking to address. So, in writing the problem statement and the subsequent justification, your literature review should have been done at that time. Okay, a much more comprehensive literature review. Okay, now the problem is what you are seeking to study. So, that problem, as you are going to state it, must be linked to the topic or the nice title that you've already put there. And the problem must be specific. It must not be a statement that when you are done, we now start worrying. So what aspect are you actually addressing? Okay. So if you said your problem you seek to address is about swine fever, for example, swine fever is a problem, it's a disease of concern, but it's so broad that we don't know whether you are talking about swine fever in the pigs, you are talking about swine fever in humans, you are talking about a particular age group, you are talking about some condition that might, in addition to swine fever, lead to particular outcomes. So, okay, thank you. I should continue from here. Okay. So if you were to say something like swine fever mortality in children under 5 is the research problem that you are interested in, that becomes much clearer because you have highlighted that it's not just about the disease, but it's about the mortality aspect of it. And you're also focusing on a particular population, which is children under 5. Okay. So how specific you are going to be is what is going to be key here with regard to stating the problem. Okay.
That's Latte. I think your
Yes,
screen has gone off. Yes.
it has gone off.
Yes.
Okay. Let me see, please see if my screen is gone off. We need to unmute in here. Okay. Please, can you see the screen now?
No, not yet.
So should I go back to sharing here?
Okay, then we'll just pick the sound from here.
It's not still.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. Please, is it sharing now?
Yes, you are back.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Okay. So I was saying that the problems, the statements that you are going to write, as in what is the problem, it needs to be information that is quite clear. So we have some guidelines on what constitutes the problem statement and what people will look out for to see that you have clarified the problem, because nothing will probably hurt as much as you have explained as best as you can what the issue is and why it needs to be addressed, and then somebody says, I'm still not getting the problem, or the problem is not clear. Okay, but it does happen. So we won't take it personal. We'll just try to clarify ourselves in a problem statement. Now, one of the things to indicate is what is the size of this public health issue that you are trying to address. So, as I said, is it something that is of global significance, or is it, let's say, a sub-regional, West Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, or something? Or is it a problem? It's not really all over Ghana, but it's just local in particular areas in Ghana. So the size of the problem or its magnitude is what you need to convey now. Okay. Now, in stating the size of the problem, we are also anticipating that you use statistics. So you don't go with things like it is a big problem. I'm sure you've seen many things like that written. It is a huge problem. It is a serious problem. You know, I mean, at that point, I always chuckle and go like, what is not serious? It's always relative, isn't it? So the size of the problem must be quantified, and that magnitude should have statistics to back it up, okay, with supporting references as much as possible. Okay, it's not really about the choice of words as in gargantuan and whatnot. Okay, then the problem, okay, it obviously has some effects in the population. It could be at individual level or at the societal level, but basically the public health effects of that problem is what you are going to tease out. So in writing your problem statement, okay, we should first of all see clearly the statement that needs to be changed, the issue that needs to be addressed. What is the problem? Write it as if the person can only read it. You are not talking to them, so that when they read it, they are able to process and understand it without you explaining to them. Okay. So state in a sentence or two what is the problem. A sentence is always preferable so that you can be brief. Okay. Then once you quantify in terms of the magnitude, you now go into the effects of the problem by talking about the causes and then the consequences. Okay. Now, in talking about the causes and the consequences, you kind of weave that together with who is affected and why are they the ones who are affected. Then why the problem exists among them becomes clearer. Okay. Now, in telling us the who is affected and why they are the ones affected, okay, sometimes their location is also of importance to kind of help us appreciate the geographic nature of the problem that you are stating. Okay. Now, your problem statement, okay, is kind of seen as the purpose of this project you are going about. So it is what is linking what you consider the problem to why this research needs to be done, which you will highlight in your significance section. Okay. Now, let me backtrack a bit and say that when you state the magnitude, always indicate clearly who it affects and as much as possible the evidence supporting how many people are affected. So instead of saying it affects quite a large number of people, for example, you will say that, oh, even if it's internal data, let's say an institutional memo that is telling us the magnitude of that problem, you say that, oh, per internal memo, Kolebu experiences 28% uterine rupture every year, you know. So it's fine to use internal documents, but we need the quantification there. Okay. And remember that this is also being seen as a disease burden. And burden is not just about the number, the magnitude, but how you present the information. Because you can state a number, but how you explain it makes it appreciable as a burden. If you say, oh, when it comes to something like cervical cancer, we are looking at, if let's say even 3% of the population has it, it is a problem. 3% is a small number in general, in terms of percentage, but in terms of cervical cancer, it's a large magnitude. Okay, so the disease burden aspect of it has to come out. Okay, and remember, burden is a societal construct, so you have to kind of bring out that aspect quite clearly. Okay, why it is a problem. Okay, then why the problem exists. Remember that it can have more than one reason why that problem exists. Ideally, problems are not because of only one factor. I mean, but what we know about what causes disease, Rothman's causal pie tells us that several components come together. You have necessary factors, you have component causes, so many things come together a lot of the time for disease to happen. And while some may be sufficient on their own to cause disease, generally, most factors are necessary factors, and then other things get added on for disease to happen. Okay, so your explanation of how the factors are related, the interrelationship between them, is what will help us to appreciate the causes of the problem. And you can't say all, so you would have to kind of hone in on the key ones, the key causes and how they are related to each other in terms of bringing out the cause of the problem. Okay, now the some of the causes you would see them as maybe main causes, and then some as other contributory causes, but together they all form why the problem exists. So please remember the small when you are writing the big. Okay, now the consequences of the problem is what would happen if nothing is done about what you are stating that you want to research. Okay, now the consequences are not always straight out just health things. It could be economic consequences. We could also have cultural implications. We could have even political, so health consequences are your focus, but if there are other aspects of the consequences or its effects, please bring them out. Then also, we are hoping that we don't see so much of consequences like, if this research is not done, people's health will deteriorate, or the outcome will be dire. Those, as I say, are more of words, semantics. We need the actual consequence, as in the tangible thing. So the cost of treating, or if it's, let's say you're talking about metabolic disorders, and you're saying that it could lead to additional comorbidities, and then the cost of treatment, the burden on the family in terms of how do you call it, even psychological or psychosocial support, would be intensive. The ability to be able to address this problem holistically would be those odds will be much higher once we are able to see the different facets of the issues that are contributing to the problem, and then we can address it. So you have to make sure that the consequences are not general but quite specific. Okay, now pictures, as they say, can speak more than words. So I have a tree here for you, and we call it the problem tree. I don't know if people have seen it before, but it kind of helps us to picture how your problem should be crafted and presented. Okay. Now, when you see a tree, there are many aspects of the tree. Okay. We see the leaves, the stem, sometimes the roots are visible, other times it's hidden. So let me begin with the problem. What is the problem? What is the problem becomes the leaves that we are seeing out there. Okay. The problem might have root causes, as we call it. What is grounding the problem? Okay. It might be hidden or not hidden, like buttress roots, fibrous roots, whatever kind of roots. There are different types of roots. So you have to bring out the different types of roots in terms of the different causes of the problem. Okay, but the stem is the part that we see, the part that is off the ground. Okay, so in talking about the causes of the problem, some of your causes, as I am saying, might be hidden. Okay, but in terms of the branches, what is coming off the ground, those then are visible for all to see. So your consequence cannot be a hidden consequence that only you can perceive or decipher. The consequence must be something that we can all, as you are guiding us to what will happen, we can envisage it. We are picturing it. We are following you. We are on board with you. We agree that this could happen. Okay. So consequences should be visible. Okay. And then the problem is something that is glaringly obvious for all of us to see, not something that you've stated it, but we still can't see the problem. Okay. So the problem tree analogy exists. Now, there are other ways to approach your problem statement. If starting out with what is the problem sentence is proving a challenge. Okay, sometimes articulating it can be a bit difficult. Okay, so the other thing you could do is begin from the approach of, okay, so what is happening now? What do we see? And then you move into what is the ideal situation that should be happening. So in bringing out that, then now it becomes clear that this is a gap that needs to be addressed. Okay, so the ideal or the expected situation starts pointing you clearly towards what is the problem that we will need to address. Okay, so in telling us the ideal, now with what is the current situation, then we can say what are the reasons why this current situation exists and what will happen if we don't do anything about it. Okay, and your justification will be, so if we get to the ideal, how will it benefit us? Okay, so the gap that you are identifying becomes the problem that you want to highlight, and then how you go about it is what you articulate in the problem statement. Okay, so let me wrap up the problem statement that if you have a good problem statement, it is going to be concise because only those 5 key areas will be addressed. You will tell us the problem, state what the problem is, and this problem should be tied to needs. So these should be needs of, let's say, national needs or national documents with regard to where we would like our health to be at by a particular timeline. Some institutional guidelines would also be helpful, or institutional needs, so that when you align yours with it, then again, it becomes easier for the institution to also support you to be able to carry out that research. Okay, so what is the problem? Then who is affected? Or if it is a what is affected, you state it, where they are located. Why does that problem exist? Okay, quantify that problem. Help us to appreciate the size and magnitude of the problem. Okay, is it a global problem, local problem? Help us to better appreciate that. Then, why does the problem exist? And what will happen if we don't do anything about the problem? And in what will happen here, we are highlighting the key things. Okay, the key things, because even in our justification, we'll talk a little bit more about that aspect. Okay, so in our justification now, since it's been brought up, in our justification now, which is the significance, we are selling why this work must be done. In fact, why must it be done now is what we are selling. Why? Because it can be done maybe another time, another year, another decade, another century. But your goal is to highlight why is it urgent for us to address this problem now. So if the proposal was kind of like a marketplace where everybody was selling off their goods, you want bidders to come forward and invest in your study. Okay, so your justification sells why this research needs to be done and done now. Okay, so you are going to put together sentences that will convince the reader of the importance, the impact, the significance of this research. Okay, and as I said, if funding is available, why they should choose you as opposed to others. Because remember, everybody is bringing their proposal because they think that is what is important to be addressed now. Okay, so in writing the justification section, you can also follow this guideline where you are telling us why the study needs to be done. Are there global, national, or local implications for doing the study when you do it? does it have importance at these levels? And if it does, what specific benefits will come out of it? Okay, if we gain knowledge on A, which will help us to address B or C, this is where that will come out. Okay, then remember we talked in the problem statement about the consequences of your research. You don't want to plagiarize yourself, but you want to highlight the negative effects of not finding solutions to the problem, because you have talked about the benefits. So if we don't do it now, how will it harm us? Okay, will it harm specific individuals or groups of people, or could it derail national agendas or something? So specifically, you can go into those. Okay, you may repeat one or two key things you said in the problem statement without plagiarizing yourself. Okay, so you paraphrase yourself, and then you tie that into how your study is bringing about change in our health system, because it's about public health practice. How are you impacting public health practice? Okay, so saying something like it will generate useful data, I'm sure by now you figured out that that will not sell. Okay, how exactly is it going to bring about change? Okay, if it's going to improve something in healthcare service delivery or something, that becomes what you want to highlight in the justification. So justification is more or less about a paragraph. It's not as much as the problem statement, which in your proposal could go, maybe even a page or two. Okay, but justification at most becomes like a paragraph, because it's the highlights of the work. You are telling us again, so why this study needs to be done, why it should be done now, what is the key benefits that will come out, and the key how do you call it, harm that will result if we don't do this research and find the answers to the questions that you are asking. Okay, and then the change that it will bring, just to emphasize or reiterate again. All right, now I wasn't sure if you had touched on the research question, but in order for me to briefly touch on the objective, I thought to just highlight the research question as component as well. Okay, so your research question is going to define what you seek to do. So in that problem statement, that gap, as I said, was going at what is it that you want to do. And in the problem statement, you have stated what is the problem. So the research question is kind of rewording that problem now into, so what do you want to do? What do you want to answer? Okay, so it defines your topic area, and then also helps us to see how your research is going to progress. What will be the nature? Okay, and what specific things are you interested in? Because you've said the problem. The problem might be quite broad, okay, but specifically, what will you be addressing? That becomes the question that must be addressed. So in stating the problem, it can be a broad problem, but you must highlight specifically the aspect of the problem that is of concern, so that when you get to research question, it then becomes easy for you to tease that out into what is the question, or what are the questions you seek to answer. Okay, and the questions is what will help you to draw out variables that you should collect information about. Okay, and constructs in terms of how to come up with a framework that puts together your exposures, your outcomes, and potential confounding variables. So the question is what will help you to arrive at these key information that you'll be needing to proceed with the proposal. Okay, and in your research question, the way you word it will also help us to know whether you are talking about a hypothesis, having a hypothesis, or you don't have a hypothesis. You don't know what will happen. You don't foresee how the relationship will go. So when you know, it's when we all know. So it's a question, and then it will be answered. It could be two-sided. Okay, but a research question that is properly defined sets boundaries, so that it's not going on and on and on. It helps us to know specifically what will we get from this research. It's giving us direction in terms of how it will be done. The research will be done, and it will be our framework for assessing. Has this research achieved what it set out to do? Okay, so your framework for assessing your work means that your research question is what we will get the objectives out of. Okay, the objectives will emanate from your research questions. Okay, so research questions are revised as you go along, as you do your literature review, as you do more reading, you might revise what you sought to answer. Okay. Typically, you modify the questions, but sometimes you realize that you have far too many questions. Some are actually embedded in others already, so you end up deleting some. And then other times too, you realize that based on the gaps in research that you are coming across, you develop new questions. Okay, so all these are acceptable, and you must not be rigid and say that this is my question, it must never change, it should remain this way forever. I'm sure you've figured out that, the way I'm even sounding means that that's not the best way to go about research. Okay. All right. So let me wrap up with the objectives of your study. In stating the objectives, okay, there's been a lot of debate about these two terms. Is it aims or objectives? Okay. Depending on which dictionary you are using, sometimes aims begin to sound a lot broader than objectives. Okay. But generally, you will see that even journals like to go with objectives because objectives are quite actionable. So they end up not being as broad as aims generally, because the aims then could be your overall goal or your overall purpose. So in general research, or let's say student work, PhD, graduate work, you see that they will have a general objective which encompasses quite a number of the specific objectives you see down the line. Then instead of having just objectives, they now say specific objectives. So the specific objectives will now be an umbrella under the general objectives. Okay, but in putting together proposals, generally sometimes we don't need that distinction like in the thesis work, so we just go with objectives. Sometimes if they ask for the goal, then you can do the broad general objective there. Okay, the goal or the purpose. Okay, so objectives, as I said, is about what your study is hoping to achieve or seeking to achieve, which means that it must be linked to your research questions. So the research question is what is now reversed to state the objective. Okay, so the research question again will not be obviously just a question mark at the end of a sentence, but it will state what you are seeking to answer, and the objective will be what you will do to answer that question. Okay, so if you have a general objective, as I've said, it's an overall goal or purpose of your research. It will include several things or several objectives that you seek to do to answer a particular broad question. Okay, which means that at the end of your research, overall, this is what would have been answered, but specific things will be done. Okay, so the specific processes are the specific objectives. Now, in writing the specific objectives, and I've put aims here because we are using it interchangeably here to mean objectives. Okay, keep the objectives simple. What do you seek to do? Now is not the time to talk long, winding sentences. If you see an objective that you have 3 lines, 4 lines, 5 lines, I'm sure your eye will even be tired by that time. Okay, and you give up and go like, man, they need colons or semicolons, and that then introduces additional complexities. Okay, so we keep our objectives simple, where the S's are specific. Specifically, what are you going to do here? Oh, I'm going to estimate the prevalence. Full stop. That is it. Additional things can be done, but an objective that will be answered is the prevalence of whatever you were seeking to do in that population. Okay. Then the objective must also sound immediate, which is why we use actionable verbs like to. And then we say assess, evaluate, how do you call it? Determine, explain, but not things like to list, to state, to identify. If you identify it, that is nice and good. But what will you do after you've identified it? Okay, you are identifying for a purpose, and that purpose is the objective. So that is what you should be getting at. So your choice of verbs to use is also important. Okay, and we always drum it into our PhD students, especially that please be professional. Use broad verbs. Okay, if your objective 1 is to determine, 2 is to determine, 3 is to determine, it's like you have become Mr. Determine. That is not proper. That doesn't show that you have put a lot of effort into thinking through what you seek to do. Because sometimes you see that to explore, because sounds like a more of a qualitative approach you'll be looking at to understand the thing further. Sounds better than to find out, to try to understand. Everybody is seeking to understand. So it's like doing a research and writing a study about. Every research is a study, so the study aspect is taken out, and then you just go straight to the title. Okay, so why must this research be done now? To assess, to evaluate, to determine, then you continue. Okay, now the objective must be measurable. If you are doing quantitative research, especially, you must put in something that, if you say to assess, it means you are going to do things that will help you collect particular information to be able to come out with that answer. Okay, so the objective must be measurable. You can't state an objective that it sounds nice. It would be good if we had the answer, but it doesn't look like it's something that we can actually measure for us to be able to come up with an answer. Like, women are the superior race. You want to have an objective to assess that. How are you going to measure that they are the superior race? What are you coming up with your own set of criteria for what makes someone superior or not? You get it? So is the sea blue? Well, yeah, that one technically it's a long process, but using both physics, chemistry, and mathematics and statistics, you should be able to answer it. But it already sounds complex. So if you say to determine the relationship between waist circumference and systolic blood pressure, that is measurable. We know that you measure waist circumference, and then you also assess systolic blood pressure. And how you do that will come up in the methods. But we know you definitely must get information for these two variables. Okay. And your objective must also be practical, as in it's something that is doable. Okay. If your objective is to determine, like Morgan Freeman said, to determine whether God exists, anybody who has seen that documentary knows that it never really answered that question, because how are you going to even answer it? It's not feasible to determine whether God exists. And feasibility is not just about can you do it, but it's also about your time limits. If your research, you are planning it for, let's say it's a cohort study that's going to go for 2 years, and by the end of the 2 years, it's not enough time for you to have answered that research question, because you need 10 years or 5 years or something like that to be able to answer it. Then your question you're asking now is not realistic. It's not doable for you. Okay, so it can be done, but for now, it's not doable for you. Okay. And then the question must be built up logically in terms of how you state the objectives. So you begin with the simple things, one at a time, that you'll be doing. And then your last objective ties together kind of the information that will answer your general or your overall objective. So in that last objective, it means you are going to use information that you've accrued from the previous objectives. Okay, so if you say to assess the prevalence of obesity in that population, and then to describe the socio-demographic characteristics of the population as your second objective, then your third objective is to determine the relationship between maternal age and how do you call it, obesity status. You see, so you need those two things before you can answer the last bit. Okay, so it should be a logical build-up so that it's coherent. When people are reading it, they are appreciating. And we start from the easy to the more complex. But remember that we said simple sentences. So when you see that you're having more than one end, you have 2 ends, 3 ends, then you see that your objective is going beyond 3 lines in your write-up to 4 lines, 5 lines. It is too long at that point. Okay, you are not having clarity. So you would need to revise that sentence, break it down. Nothing stops you from having it as 2 specific objectives as opposed to 1 very long, lengthy, non-understandable objective. Okay. Or they understand part of it, but the remaining part, they are lost. Okay. And then finally, your objective must also be something that we can evaluate. So we should be able to tell, based on what you've stated as your objective, is it going to have any meaningful contribution to public health practice. Okay, that is something people will assess as they look at your objective. Okay. All right. Now, your choice of words for your objectives. Remember, I said that actionable verbs. So I've indicated a few of them here to remind you, okay, that you need common words that people are familiar with, words that will not throw people off. To if you say something like to juxtapose, I mean, at that point, I'm even not sure I want to continue understanding because it already sounds plenty, to paradoxify, to conceptualize, please bring the words down to things that the lay person who picks it up can at least begin to appreciate some, if not all of the information. Okay, so your choice of verbs plays a key role in writing the objective. It's not just about the two in the beginning part. Okay, and make sure that you avoid, as I said, things like to find out, because everybody is finding out something in their objectives. Okay, to list, to know. I mean, I'm sure you all get it by now, so let's not beat that point to death. Okay. Now, we said the general objective is broad. So if you have a general objective like to determine how a pet owner's educational status influences outcome of acute worm infestation in dogs, okay, that sounds like a lot you are doing in that research. So that then is your general objective. So from here, I can begin to see specific things you'll be looking at. You said pet owners. So you want to know something about pet owners. Their educational status stands out here. You also want to know probably their knowledge about worm infestation. Then, any other aspects of the general objective that you want to tease out. But see that the third objective, if you write something like to find out how how mothers or pet owners respond to acute worm infestation in dogs, that is a very confusing thing. Why does it have to be mothers and dogs? Is it the mother of the dog or is it the mother of the human being? So you may have keywords that are still part of your general objective, but you've lost everyone because of how you've kind of amalgamated the whole information. Okay, so the general objective means that if you are not ready to write that general objective, you list the questions, research questions, write objectives for each research question as much as possible, one for each, so that you don't confuse yourself. Then if you were to fuse all this together, what sentence, in terms of the specific objectives, what sentence, one single sentence, describe what you want to do? Okay, so it means some of the specific objective information will show up in the general objective, but not all. And it has to be your key things that show up in the general objectives. Okay. All right. Now, just as I showed the problem tree, there's also the notion of SMART objectives that goes around. So I just wanted to share that. That's another way of rephrasing the objectives in terms of simple. So with SMART, it means that, again, be specific. Okay, so what are the concrete events or activities you are going to undertake to answer a particular question? Okay, and then measurable in terms of you want a change. So what are you to be achieved? The change to be achieved. So what are you going to do? How are you going to go about the work? Quantify that activity and show us how that activity will be done. Okay, then appropriate means that the logical aspect that we talked about. Okay, we want to see an overall effect in terms of your research, but what you want to do now, that question, is it appropriate to answer what you set out to do? So it must be logical, basically, in terms of how you are presenting it. And then realistic, as we said, doable. Okay, it's not doable, as we said, it's not just about can it be done, but can it be done within the time frame that you have? And then do you also have the resources? It's also part of the realistic and doable. So if it can be done in the time frame, but you don't have the resources to be able to do the research, then that question is not appropriate for you. That objective is not appropriate for you. Okay. And then also time-based. Remember that if it's realistic, then it means that you can find information within the time frame of the research to answer those questions. So if within the time frame you cannot find the questions, then your objective is not smart, it's not time sensitive. Okay. So to wrap up, your introductory section, which will have the background or the introduction itself, the problem you are seeking to state, the or carry across, then the justification, then your objectives. Your introductory section should lead your reader, whoever is reading the work, in no doubt about what are you seeking to answer. Okay, what is the question? That is what they should get when they are done. What are you going to do here in this research? Okay, and they should also have, ample knowledge about why is this work important, not to you, but in terms of overall, why must it be done and why must it be done now? Okay, and then it should kind of have brought out enough in terms of you teasing out the problem it causes, the what your objective will be, and then just briefly how you go about it. We are now beginning to anticipate the kinds of information we'll get and how it will be useful. So the reader is left expecting more, which is why then they would want to know more. They want to now go into, let me see the methods. How would they go about answering these objectives? If you lose them at the introduction, they will not get into your methods. Okay, you've lost them. That's it. Okay, so we don't want it overly boring. So when we begin, as we said, we can make it as much as possible for the overall introduction section, maybe 4 pages, but then we can summarize that, after we are done with the different aspects of it, so that we make sure that all components are there. And remember that the very last paragraph is the selling point. So what is the gap that you are addressing? How are you going to go about it? And what will it seek to address? Okay. So thank you very, very much for your rapt attention. I very much appreciate you inviting me to share my little knowledge. But I also wanted to leave you with this slide. We cannot have research without talking about Bloom's taxonomy. So for those who have heard it before, Bloom's is reminding us that if we want our research to be effective, to be impactful, then all components must be addressed. We must seek to create something new to fill a void or improve upon something existing. Our approach for evaluating must be sound. Okay, so that is where your rigorous methods will come in. Our approach for analyzing as well must also be impactful. And then we must seek to apply what we are learning. So that what you are learning must be used to help address a particular something. And for us to be able to use it, it means we must have a better understanding of the situation now because of the different aspects that you've brought. So Bloom's is another whole lecture on its own, but at least I'll leave you with the slide so that you can do some further reading on your own. So thank you very much. And moderator, over to you.
Wow. Thank you, Dr. Abdulati. I think it was worth the wait. Someone sent a message that, oh, this is worth the wait. So thank you very much. The floor is open. If you have any question, please raise your hand. I'll call you and then you ask your question. This has been very enlightening. And we'll note that the YouTube link is hosted on the PSG YouTube page. So you can always go back and then go over the lecture. And the slides will also be shared. We are creating a folder on the PSD website to access all these resources that are being shared over the months. So we also have the access to the slides. So the floor is open. Kindly raise your hand and I'll invite you to ask your burning question.
Moderator.
Alexa, please come in.
Sorry, just 1 second. I'm signing out of the other device.
Okay, it's better now.
Okay. Yeah, I was just making a joke that you didn't tell me about the YouTube. I would have worn my Christmas dress.
Oh, this is delightful. Your background is excellent. So it will make very nice video on YouTube. Yeah, so we record it and host it there so that our participants can always go back and then those who could not join for one reason or the other also have the benefit of going over the lecture. Yes. This has been very, very insightful. I think we have a few messages in there. Okay, can you please share your slides? I think we've addressed that. And then great with so many claps. Thank you for your insightful presentation, Dr. Latte. Yes. Those who are sending personal messages, you can put it in the chat box. Please, questions, clarifications, or maybe you are writing your own proposal. I know our PG coordinator is listening, and then maybe there's a section that you want to clarify. You can bring your own work here and then seek clarity. Okay. So this means that this was probably one of the clearest teachings on introduction and problem statements and objectives. I agree. So who is coming in? Question, clarification? Okay, someone is asking, when are we doing the conceptual framework? Okay, so we'll note it, and since Dr. Abdulate is very ready to help us with that, we'll find the date and the time, and then once everything comes together nicely, we would advertise it. Yes. Okay. Dr. Abdulate, they don't have any question. We don't have any follow-up question or clarification. But do you have a last message for us? Yes. This has been very insightful.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, you are back.
Yeah, so I was saying that I was hoping for the tough questions, the ones that will get me cracking my brain and you see it rotating in my head. But since you are going to stew over that and bring those later, I will thank you once again for the opportunity to share. And I'm available via email as well. So if anyone comes up with something that they would like some small input on the side, please, I'm available for that as well. And thank you very much for bearing with me. It's only when you are overly prepared that everything goes wrong in life. So our beginning was rocky, and I so very much apologize for that. Okay. Thank you very much.
You have been so
I see
kind.
Dr. Boy
I think
showed
Madam President is here. Madam
on
President,
the screen.
please, the floor is yours. Would you like to close us? And the date for the next session will be communicated. We'll try and go back to our regular Thursdays. So please, let's take notes.
Okay.
Yes. And we also follow up with a communication we've received some requests for CPD accreditation. Initially, these were not captured as such. So we'll come back to you with some updates in that regard for those interested in CPD points and certificates. So we'll come back to you with a clearer communication to that effect. Thank you. Okay, Madam President, the floor is yours.
No, so I was just asking about how to avoid repeating yourself in the introduction, in the justification, problem statement, how to avoid repetitions.
Self-plagiarism. Okay.
Yes. All right. Hello, please, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Excellent. Now we are back on the computer that gave us the trouble in the beginning. Yeah, so thank you so much. This is very important because I
Dr.
kept you.
Lati, sorry,
Yeah.
sorry to cut in. Please check the second camera. I think it's out of focus. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. I'll just close.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So, yes, in your introductory section, you have to give the background. As we said, you will talk about the problem, the justification, and then your research question objectives that you seek to address. So, the first thing has to do with the kinds of statistics that or information you'll be putting across, which is why I highlighted that as much as possible, use the systematic reviews or the review articles in particular to bring a summarized concept into the introduction. Okay, and then you can use the individual research where you will now summarize what individual studies have found. You will summarize that one in the literature review section, okay, to talk about particular aspects. Now, something like in the problem statement where we were talking about the causes and then the consequences, that is also a tricky bit because once you indicate the key consequences that will happen if this research is not done in your problem statement, when you get to justification, consequence is also another part of why this work is justified and must be done now. So that's the part where I said that you are allowed to reiterate your most, like the main consequence, okay? But that one you have to paraphrase yourself. And then you support it with additional ones that you did not mention in the problem statement. So in your problem statement, that aspect about the consequences is just a small bit, like a paragraph supporting your causes. You understand? But in the justification, you are now going to tease out the main thing and then the additional things that will happen. So as much as will sell the work without being overly boorish in the end. Okay. So you can paraphrase yourself, but you don't overdo that a bit as well. Okay. And then you also word your research question in a manner that when you state your objective, we can see clearly that this objective is tied to this research question. And it's not simply putting the two there in front of the objective. Okay. And as for general statistics that you will use, as I said, you are free to paraphrase again, but if you go with using the meta-analysis and the systematic reviews, to summarize the aspects that you want to share in the background, then you won't have to worry so much when you get to literature review in terms of plagiarizing yourself. So basically, the introduction, as I said, doesn't have to be done first. So you could do the literature review, and then from each section of the literature review, now get paragraphs kind of clearly indicating or explaining that area or that aspect. Then you now put them together in your introduction to form one coherent paragraph. So you build up the logic. Okay, so it can be done after you've done the literature review, and that is ideal. But even if the literature review has not been done, once you've done some reading, it helps. A lot of the time I still do my introductions under subheading, even if it's an article. I will do it under subheadings just to make sure that I have enough paragraphs addressing particular aspects. Then I now take off the subheadings and try to link them, so that it flows coherently. And then reduce the content, summarize. And when you are done writing all that, there is always the AI tools to help you. I always recommend that write something first before you take it to AI to master it or to summarize it. Then you will not lose sight of the focus, the content that you wanted. But if you ask it to generate something for you, it will bring anything and everything. Okay. So you can do more first and then trim it down. Okay. And then don't forget that you can pass your work through a plagiarism checker too when you are done in terms of each section, so that you make sure that even for that section, you haven't really plagiarized yourself there before you move to another aspect of the proposal. Thank you.
Okay,
Very much.
thank you, Dr. Lati. Yes. Any other follow-up question or any new question? Let's see. Okay. Thank you so much, Doc. Super presentation. That's Dr. Daniel and Dr. Kilba. Thank you very much.
I'm most grateful for
Yes.
your very kind, flattering words.
Wow. All right. So we are coming to the end of our session for today. Let's stay tuned on our PSG platform. The various announcements will come through there. But as I said, we will likely go back to our regular Thursday sessions so that we can all plan accordingly. So thank you for making the time, and thanks so much for your patience. We'll see you again very soon. And thank you, Dr. Abdulati. This has been very, very, very educative and very good guidance for us. Enjoy your evening.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
evening, everyone. Bye.